Welcome everyone to CCI Huronia's 12th and final webinar on COVID-19 and how to deal with this crisis in your condo. My name is Sonia Hodis and I'm one of the many directors at CCI Huronia, a condominium lawyer, as well as your moderator tonight. If you've missed any of our previous webinars, including our Lunch and Learn webinar on electronic meetings and voting bylaws, you can find these past webinars on our website, ccihuronia.com, under the Resource Content tab. Who are we? Well, the Canadian Condominium Institute, CCI, is an independent nonprofit organization formed in 1982. We have chapters from across the country, and in Ontario alone, we have 8 chapters. CCI Huronia is one of these Ontario chapters. Our main objective is education. However, CCI also advocates for condos. We represent all those involved in condos, from owners to directors to professionals, and we encourage all these stakeholders to work together. If you're not a member of CCI and you want to experience the benefits of membership, please check out one of your local chapters and consider joining today. Debbie's going to put some information in the chat box on how to find your local chapter. CCI National has also collated numerous resources on COVID-19, and that can be found on the national website, cci.ca, under the Resource Center tab, or if you go to the CCI Huronia website, you can get a direct link to that landing page. In addition, CCI National hosted a Canada-wide webinar on COVID on May 7th, and that recording is also available on the Resource Center. Please don't forget to follow and like us on Facebook, and also that's a great place to find out about our upcoming events. So since our last webinar 2 weeks ago, we've had a couple new bits of information. The CERB benefit was extended to October 3rd, 2020, so another 8 weeks of benefits have been added to those that qualify. The border between the US and Canada is closed until July 21st for non-essential travel. Now we do allow essential travel and immediate family members to cross. Travel between the provinces, for the most part, has not been restricted, but it's not being encouraged, and there are still some provinces that have stricter regulation than others. Ontario has extended the declaration of emergency and emergency orders to the end of June. We're now able to gather in groups of 10. And recently, Ontario released a new workplace safety plan and a toolkit to help employers create safer working conditions for employees. And Debbie's going to put a link on the chat box so that you can check out that resource if that's of interest to you. Last webinar, we had many of our regions across Ontario moving into stage 2. Toronto and Peel were 2 of 3 regions that have now just been given the go-ahead to move into stage 2 tomorrow. Windsor Essex is the last region in the province that has not moved into stage 2. And as the province is slowly opening and cautiously easing restrictions, one thing that we do know is that there's a lot of information that we still don't understand, and things keep changing. But we also know we're not out of the pandemic yet, and there is a talk about a second wave possibly coming in the fall. So we must still keep up our guards, be cautious, maintain physical distancing, good hygiene practices, and although not mandatory, wear masks in public as a sign of respect for our fellow citizens. We're not in a place yet where we can let our guards down despite the positive moves we are seeing to reopening, and it's definitely not the time to return to normal. So tonight, as I said at the beginning, is our last webinar before we break for the summer, and we've done 12 webinars dedicated to COVID, and we are going to be focusing this webinar on lessons learned as we potentially prepare for the second wave. We're also going to be talking about how managers are managing various expectations, and we're going to get a fire safety update tonight. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers for dedicating their time and putting this webinar together, and CCI as a national organization for all of their support. Before we start with our first speaker, just our usual reminders. Please mute your phones and mute your mics, and please shut off your cameras. This is so that we can get a good recording, so those that can't be with us tonight will be able to see us in the future. We are recording this webinar, and it should be available on our website hopefully within the next 48 hours. If you're having any trouble with the connection, just end the meeting, log in again, and as a last resort, if you're having trouble with your computer or your internet, you can always log in and just listen by phone. We are going to try and take live questions tonight at the end of the webinar. You still can feel free to put any questions in the chat box. If you want to ask a live question, save your question to the end of the webinar and we will try and get to you. The way we're going to do this is you're going to need to raise your hand. So if you are on a phone, all you need to do is press *9. And if you're logged into your computer, laptop, iPad, or a phone, you can just click on the Participants tab, and then you will see the raise hand function. It looks like 2 heads, and that will indicate to me that you want to ask a question. If you decided you no longer want to ask your question, just press lower hand, and then I won't call on you. And our disclaimer, don't forget that the information that is being provided today is general information and is not specific in terms of your specific fact situation. It's very important that you contact your professionals for advice in these challenging times and get specific advice about your specific situation. If you are a condo director and you want to use the protection of Section 37 of the Condominium Act, you do need to get an opinion from your professional about your fact situation. This webinar is not intended to provide you with opinions that will protect you under Section 37. In addition, the information provided today in this webinar is current as of June 23rd, 2020, and as things are changing rapidly, the information today may not be relevant or applicable at a future date. Also, please be advised, if you're listening to this webinar and you're not in Ontario, all references to the Condominium Act or other legislation is reference to Ontario legislation. So tonight, Michelle Farley is going to kick us off, and she's going to give us a fire safety update before we move into the summer session, and we don't see each other for a couple of months. So Michelle, what's your advice to everyone tonight?
Well, thank you very much, Sonia. I always appreciate listening to the property managers' webinar reports as they have real condo experiences that are current and we can all learn from. And I'm hearing a lot from the fire safety community. So I want to talk about a couple that we've faced personally. Recently, our team has returned to attending sites for in-suite fire code compliance and life safety system testing with new COVID-19 safety protocols to keep both the residents and our team safe and protected. I want to share 2 of these recent experiences FCS has encountered, one that potentially put us at risk and the other that went well, both using the same detailed COVID protocols. One of our FCS teams attended a condo to perform diagnostic artificial smoke testing between units due to escalating complaints of odor migration, which was becoming intolerable and potentially a fire risk. Our project manager implemented all pre-site COVID communications, confirmed negative COVID status 2 weeks before and 48 hours before site attendance, reaffirmed COVID negative status at site, and the team was prepared to initiate in-suite testing. In general conversation with the supervisory staff, it became apparent that contrary to verbal and email confirmations from the site, there was recent active COVID in the building. In fact, a full-time supervisory staff member had tested positive the previous week, and the staff member that was attending our team was in the process of being tested as well. Our team was also faced with a resident with young children that was unaware that we were coming and entering her suite, although we were assured all were notified to vacate and would vacate their suites before our entry. Our team lost faith in the information they were given regarding COVID, felt vulnerable, and chose to reschedule the testing and leave the site. The manager called later to express anger at our team leaving the project, however, with no regard for the potential compromise of my team's safety and no reason for the lack of information that would have allowed them to make an informed site attendance decision and better prepared the residents. This experience almost had a negative effect on a second project scheduled for the following week. The team debated whether to attend, and I supported this. However, a decision had to be made whether to postpone or proceed with this in-suite odor migration testing project. We decided to proceed. We applied all the same COVID protocols and confirmed suites had to be vacated. I spoke to the staff personally, reiterated protocols for the manager to ensure suites were vacated before our testing, and we reaffirmed that our team would leave the premises if we or the residents felt uninformed or concerned. The site attendance went perfectly. All residents were aware, knew the process, and were pleased to accommodate our team. The manager personally oversaw the residents vacating, pre and post cleaning of suites, and remained readily available to assure everyone's safety and success. And above all, the suite tested positive for 2 substantial migrations from other units, not one as originally suspected, and one of the migrations filled the second suite with smoke within seconds. This was an essential test. I'm sharing these stories to demonstrate how managers, residents, and contractors can work together to accommodate work during COVID safely with accurate and timely communication. For our team and the residents experiencing the migration, this is about life safety. The compromised fire separations pose a considerable risk. The diagnostic testing was essential, like so many of the projects and processes in condominiums every day. With continued reports of escalating fire events from fire departments during the pandemic, it is so important now more than ever that we all remember our obligations under the fire code and maintain fire code compliance, maintain good records, and establish safety protocols from the corporation to the management, residents, professionals, and contractors. We can all keep our people and those living and working in our condos safe. Fires are still on the rise. This is about everybody's safety and getting the job done. We're all in this together. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks for that update and encouraging news that we can still carry on the business that needs to be done despite the restrictions and some of the hurdles that we might have to overcome. So joining us tonight for the first time on our webinar, not the first time at one of our CCI events, but on our webinar is Casey Beacock, who's the president of Sanderson Management based in Waterloo. And Casey is a property manager, and she's going to talk to us tonight about managers and the various expectations that they need to manage. Casey?
Thank you, Sonia. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. And Michelle, you talk exactly to what you're leading to exactly what I'm going to talk about tonight, and all of the expectations that managers have to take into account as they're performing their jobs during these unprecedented times. So a manager is typically responsible for carrying out the functions of management, such as planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Managing during COVID and managing expectations mean that managers also have to be leaders, and good and effective leaders. And those are 2 different things. Not all managers can effectively lead, and not all leaders can effectively manage. So it's important to understand how those skill sets have to combine so that you can easily go ahead and manage the expectations of the number of parties that you have to deal with. So we've heard it said that a good leader considers the big picture and must use big picture thinking. And that's so important. We have to look at the picture and see where we're going and where we need to get to for everyone involved. I'm going to kind of move into a bit of a jigsaw puzzle analogy to talk about this and how we do this. So typically when we do a puzzle, we pull out all the pieces and we set the box up, and it has the picture of the puzzle on the box, and we're able to see where we're going. The finished product is there in front of us, right? We're able to look at the pieces we have and the finished product and know where we're going. And that's typical of managing. When someone calls because their screen door is broken or they have potholes, we're able to know what that process is, and we're able to confidently tell them what that process looks like because we do it all the time and we know what that end product looks like. When we're trying to do a puzzle during COVID, it's like the box is blank. There is no picture, right? All we have are a number of pieces that we have to somehow put together. And so as managers, we've done lots of puzzles before, and we know the strategies that we use and what needs to be done. And so as we're employing these strategies through COVID, we see a mass number of pieces and we begin to transform them into the picture, and we see where we need to go and how we need to move forward. And that picture gradually becomes clearer. But gradual and slow isn't something people who live in condominiums or managers are used to. They're used to hopping along and getting it all done rather quickly. And so the keys to managing typically are the strategy. What must we do? That's the strategy. Then our mission. What do we want to achieve? What's the purpose? Why are we here? What is the condo board trying to deliver to get into action? And then action, let's do it. We have all that stuff in place and let's move forward. Let's get it done. But during this pandemic, as managers, we've become increasingly aware of what's missing from this list. And the thing that's missing from this list is where are the people? We don't at once talk about the people. We talk about the job, we talk about where we need to go and how we can communicate that effectively, but we don't talk about the people, and that's a big decision. That's a big component that we're missing. In order to manage expectations, we need to make sure that we put people in the middle of every decision that we make. And so during times of crisis like COVID, as leaders, we know where we want to go. As I said, we're clear, we know our job, but the roads are usually blocked, and there's a number of detours that we have to get around. And these changes that happen during crisis become a huge distraction. And this distraction might be, if we turn it around, just what we need to get back on track and change things to the better, and better be able to manage all of those expectations. So therefore, in order to manage expectations, we have to be aware of what's going on around us. We need to be intuitive, because we don't know what that next step is, and we don't know what detour is around that corner. And we need to be agile, not from necessarily a physical standpoint, but we need to be agile in the fact that we're able to quickly move from one detour to another and know what we're doing. With COVID, we don't have an end in sight. As busy, active social beings, we all want it over quickly. We want it done with. But realistically, we know that this is likely going to last longer than we want it to. And as managers, what's our next step? How do we talk to everyone about that? And how do we make people realize that we're listening and this is what we're doing? So as managers, our next step is just to take the next step. Don't try to take 5 steps, because we don't know where 5 steps is going to lead us at this time. Adapting to change at this time isn't optional, but it's imperative. And as managers, we hear lots of voices. We have voices coming at us from all directions, right? We have owners who are now home more often than not, and they're calling and emailing because they see the same thing day after day after day. And you know, before that wouldn't have bothered them because they were busy as well, but they're now home, so they see it constantly. And they know they're home, but they don't quite understand that, you know, everyone else is home too, right? So getting that job done isn't necessarily going to happen tomorrow. And we have boards of directors who, again, are hearing from owners because they're all home together. And we have service providers, professionals, we have contractors, we have other members of our team, we have our boss, we have everyone, we have all of these voices coming at us. And as managers, we have to have the ability to integrate all of those thoughts, blending them all. We sit in the middle with input from boards, owners, contractors, service providers, governing authorities, and we are the go-between and need to filter that information and figure out how to redirect it to where it needs to go, and to do that effectively. That's what's really important in managing expectations. We need to trust our intuition even more during the crisis than ever, because we don't always have all the facts in front of us, because we can't take 5 steps, we can only take 1. And so it's also important to remember through these times, it's all about the people. So being a good leader starts with being a good human being. My mantra to my team is being kind, right? Being a good person includes being compassionate and being accessible and being approachable and being responsive to the needs of others. Because again, we know our job and we can get there, but you have to remember the people. We have to bring the people into this. And we have to understand the context of where other people are coming from as well, because that also feeds into how people expect things and what they think that outcome is going to be. So to succeed, again, awareness, anticipation, and agility are the key factors to that. And so another thing that we have to do through this process in order to manage expectations is that we have to be flexible and to change direction as needed. Often we have plan A and plan B for something that's happening within our condominium community. But at this time, it's better to probably have plans A through D, and if you can, include an A and an F, because you don't know what's going to change until you know you need to change it. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works. So if we need to implement plan F, we're ready to go and we're not scrambling to catch up. That's really, really important. So how do we lead through this and how do we manage those expectations? First and foremost, we have to manage ourselves. You must be in a good spot personally to manage your own and others' expectations. It's so important. So this includes your physical, mental, and emotional health, the well-being of all of you. So it's very important to be in a good space yourself. We have to agree in principle with our boards and our owners and our contractors and our teams. And then agreeing in principle, what we share are the realistic details about how that will be accomplished, how we're going to deliver that. Because absolutely, we agree that, you know, that pothole needs to be fixed. But realistically, that can't happen because the contractors just got back to work and there's special protocols to be followed, and we're 9th on the list because there were 10 people ahead of us. And we have to be able to deliver that effectively and let them know that. We have to communicate on a frequent basis, even over communicate. And when we do communicate, we have to communicate reality. As I said, we can agree in principle with their huge idea of what they want to get done because they think everyone has time on their hands right now. But we have to do that with care and compassion and frequently. And we have to put we in the picture. It's not us against them. It's not you against me. It's us. It's we. We're in this together. We're doing this together. And we also have to put hope. Us telling you not tomorrow doesn't mean not ever. And so that's what's important to deliver in the message. We have to consider the good thing that's going to come out of this and celebrate the small wins. That's how we get through every day, right? We have to, for my team, we have the thing where we hashtag small wins, and we talk about that every week. What small win did you accomplish today? And part of that is managing the expectations of, you know, whoever, a contractor, that because they finally got to do a job they've been waiting to do because they finally had a team in place and we were able to organize it fast enough for them to get there. I've had a lot of those comments from some engineers who've had big projects waiting and now, okay, can you make this happen for us? And magically we do because we're ready for it. We had plan F ready to go. We have to give people what they want before they know they want it. And this is where it comes to being absolutely prepared, right? So we don't want to be there preventing fires. We want to be, fighting fires. We want to be preventing fires. That's where we want to be. And then once we have all the information, decisions are much easier. And so I'm going to just kind of close it out with a couple of things that are really important. That during this crisis, we make a choice. Are we going to continue to be negative, or are we going to change our approach to one that we can control what's happening and move forward? And when we do that, that's contagious in passing it on to other people along the way, because we can fall into negativity or we can create the positivity. And that's our job as managers in managing those expectations. And for those of you who have lots going on right now, remember that it's not the number of items on the sheet that matter, but it's the weight of those items, right? They might not be huge. They might not be life-threatening. And again, it's not how many answers you can give people, but it's the strength of the answer that you provide. So I hope that helps in managing expectations.
Thanks, Casey. And, you know, it's very interesting to listen to you. And I think, you know, listening from a manager's perspective and all that you guys have to juggle in a day, my hat's off to you. And I know we thank all our essential workers, and managers are definitely on that list. And to all the managers out there, to the managers who are speakers tonight, to the managers who are listening, thank you all for the work that you do. And I think we should remember that, to thank our managers, because they're juggling a lot of balls and managing a lot of expectations while we're all trying to make it through this crisis together. So thanks, Casey, for all those insights, those great insights. So we are going to step up the pace. And if you were with us a couple weeks ago when we did our great amenity debate, you would have enjoyed a fun and interesting evening of rapid fire information. And we're going to do that again tonight as we close out our last webinar. And our rapid fire tonight is going to be lessons learned preparing for the second wave. We've kind of experienced a couple months of COVID and having to deal with it. And so we brought back as many of the speakers that have joined us over the last 2 weeks to share the one lesson that they learned through these last couple months that hopefully will help us prepare if a second wave comes, as they're talking about in the fall. So to start us off tonight, we have Ashley Winberg, who is a condo lawyer. Ashley, what's the one lesson you learned?
What I learned is the importance of comprehensive and detailed force majeure clauses in contracts. I never had really appreciated how important these clauses can be. And going forward, because we don't know what the future entails, we should, when reviewing any contract that's entered into going forward, wording should clearly stipulate that the force majeure clause covers any future contagions, infectious disease, health emergencies, pandemics, and that specifically be included, and that the consequences of the force majeure event be clearly delineated. But it is important to keep in mind that because we now know about COVID, we are anticipating future waves, we generally know what the consequences are for any contracts entered into going forward. The force majeure clauses are not going to apply. So I really recommend that parties ensure that there's a specific COVID-19 clause that can delineate the current or future consequences of the pandemic itself on the parties' respective responsibilities, and provide some certainty with respect to COVID-19 and the measures implemented, and how those may affect the parties' rights and obligations. Some other, just very quickly, I'll say some other contractual terms, which I now think are highly important given this particular incident, and who knows what could occur in the future. Fixed price contracts are likely going to become less common. These are preferred for condominium corporations. So if condominium corporation is presented with one, it will likely include a number of exclusions. So it's very important to review the contract to ensure that the exclusions are clearly stipulated and the circumstances in which the exclusions apply are reasonable. Also, dispute resolution clauses in contracts. At the height of the pandemic, the courts are closed. So parties may want to think about some out-of-the-box dispute resolution mechanisms, like referring it to an internal expert for determination, or something aside from the formal mediation, arbitration, and legal proceeding manner. Also, two more things. It's incredibly important to ensure that you have in your contracts a requirement of proper disease prevention or protocols and safety protocols and measures to ensure that this requirement is included in the contract, as well as a disclosure requirement, and that the respective obligations of the parties are delineated. And in that regard, you may also want to ensure that you have a very comprehensive indemnity provision in your contract to ensure that if one of the parties breaches the agreed upon COVID or pandemic safety protocol, that if something were to happen, then the other party would be indemnified by the party in breach.
Okay.
And also,
you've been gonged. You've been gonged. You got to put it in the chat box. We got to keep going. I forgot to tell you, speakers, you got 3 minutes. You're going to be gonged if you hit that 3-minute mark.
Fair enough.
Up next, another condominium lawyer from our Grand River chapter, Robert Mullen. What did you learn over the last couple months?
How to try to use Zoom successfully.
Yeah.
Confessional. During the early days of the pandemic, there was an email sent out which suspected that common element fees would not be collected during the pandemic. Perhaps some of us remember that email. And I had a panic reaction because by about 8 o'clock at night, I thought that without collecting fees, we weren't going to be able to pay managers. There was going to be no garbage collection for condos. The elevators would shut down. And by midnight, I think I was actually in another state of mental being, which was not a productive place to be. I was definitely in a panic state. Panic, I think, has been, certainly in the early days, was widespread. I'm sure most of us felt a measure of it. I know I certainly did. Certainly have read up on it. Panic releases cortisol and adrenaline into your brain. And although I'm not a doctor, what I've read is that actually diminishes your ability to think. All of us on this Zoom meeting today are in some way required to think very clearly on behalf of who we serve. And if we fall into panic, we are not servicing either ourselves or the people we serve very well. It's a truism, don't panic, keep calm, carry on. But in this environment that we've just been through and may return to in the fall, panicking is corrosive to the leadership duties that we have to fulfill. So how can we avoid panic? Well, first, be mindful of that panic will come. Be mindful of the reaction you'll feel when you get it, and avoid, if you can, embellishing it and deepening it like I did that evening. I didn't get a good night's sleep, and I'm sure I did a great job the next day. To be mindful that panic also is very contagious. I can literally be sitting at my desk. I get a phone call from someone and they're going 100 miles an hour, and within about 3 seconds, so am It is a contagious condition that we share, so be mindful that other people can certainly give it to you. And also, lastly, if we do go into a second wave, and I hope we don't, but if we do, how much we dive into the various articles, legal articles occasionally. Lawyers perhaps are part of the challenge, if I may. But the deep dive into the articles that are speculative in nature, which perhaps embellish our panic reflex as well. So just like Casey said, I kind of had a post-it note, this is what I wrote, deal with what you're dealing with. That was my takeaway. Deal with what you're dealing with, and don't embellish the panic of what may be, the what if this happens? Well, we'll deal with that when we get to it. Deal with what you're dealing with. Recognize that panic is contagious, and we are in a leadership duty to think clearly, and panic is corrosive to that. So that's my takeaway from having a few sleepless nights myself.
Oh, just under the wire there. Don't panic. You're okay. All right. Mina, who's an engineer with the CCI Huronia Board of Directors. What did you learn in the last month?
I would say that the biggest lesson that I learned was this tendency to put off or hold off what one would normally do and hit the pause button. And as a result of that, there's some repercussions that I think the biggest issue that has resulted from hitting the pause button for most condo corps, or for a lot of condo corps, is this notion of meetings. And because of the restrictions on large gatherings, a lot of condominium corporations have put off their AGMs, and so that seems to be a pretty common theme throughout the condominium community these days. Is how do we get around this restriction on large gatherings, and how do we hold meetings? And some condos just have decided that they're going to wait. And we're finding now that condominiums that have AGMs that are scheduled for the fall are quickly, the time is running out. And so they have owners that are down in, down south, snowbirds and that sort of thing. And they have no means of holding a meeting because they really haven't pivoted to accommodate the new situation. So that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through all of this, is this notion of how do you quickly adjust to restrictions on social gatherings or large gatherings. And like today, we're holding a meeting electronically, and some condominiums they've adopted that technology, and they're moving along. Others have not, and they're finding themselves behind the 8 ball. AGMs, as everyone probably knows, are to be held within 6 months of your fiscal year end. And so some condominiums are probably getting close to that line where they're not going to meet that requirement. And I'll just finish off by saying one other thing that condos should probably be prepared for in the future, if and when a second wave does come, is dealing with issues such as owner requisition meetings, and trying to be prepared for that sort of thing, because COVID is not an excuse for an owner requisition meeting. And if you do have something like that come up, you're obligated to hold that meeting. So thanks, Sonia. I'll finish off there.
Okay, thanks. Moving on to Justin from our good friend from Eastern Ontario. Justin, what did you learn over the last couple months?
You learned to unmute your mic first, Justin.
You were unmuted.
I learned that trying to manage a corporation or a condo during the pandemic was trying to catch a gerbil in a plastic ball with oven mitts and your feet tied together. We went through so much day-to-day change. One day there was hockey, and then there was no hockey. One day we were in the office, and then we weren't in the office. One day there were Terry-on deadlines, and then there were no Terry-on deadlines. One day we were told construction was going to be shut down, but then, psych, it's not shutting down at all. One day we were told PMs and engineers were essential, and then we weren't. And then one day we were told construction was really going to be shut down, but then just kidding again, we're only shutting down some constructions. Don't clean your windows for a while. So with all our clients, our teams, we started out this pandemic trying to guess what would happen tomorrow. And then tomorrow came and the information came out and we were a step behind. So I echo much of what Casey and Robert said regarding the biggest lesson I learned. We really developed a Zen approach to planning for the day after tomorrow based only on the information that we had. And whatever tomorrow brought, we had a plan. We just didn't fall in love with it. And that provided us with relief and focus and purpose, which is only slightly better than panic, but it was nice.
Thanks, Justin. All right, moving on to John Jeffs from the CCI Huronia Board of Directors. I know one thing that we learned in the last couple of months is that tomorrow is John's birthday. So happy birthday in advance, John. But what did you learn in the last couple of months?
Well, certainly as I begin my next trip around the sun, I've given a lot of thought to cooperation. I've always been a big cooperator, and I think this pandemic perhaps forced us to be even more so. But I will mention 3 areas, because I have 3 minutes, where I really think the cooperation was demonstrably, significantly much better than it has been in the past. The first one is the authorities having jurisdiction, particularly related to construction. And as Justin said, all the uncertainties of whether it's on again, off again, there, not there. We discovered that, despite all the normal adversarial roles in construction and building inspectors and so on, that they can actually change for the better and recognize that there are other professionals out there that they can lean on. And so we were able to provide services to, and in places like Toronto and Barrie and to a lesser extent York region and some of the outlying regions as far north as North Bay, that as long as we were willing to carefully document the things that they would have been looking at but felt they couldn't because they were at risk in the COVID times, that they could rely upon us to do that reasonably well. It did take a few test runs, and there were a few, hiccups along the way, and a couple of revisits and so on. But at the end of the day, the parties cooperated, and we overcame the challenges. The second group, I've been wonderfully surprised at the cooperation of condominium boards. Normally, they can be a little finicky about when they have meetings and who's in attendance and how that meeting's conducted and so on. And that finickiness got tossed out the window, and they decided to embrace technology and join meetings sometimes on their lunch hours when they were working from home and, approving whatever it was that needed to be approved, or at least asking the right questions about how do we move forward. And that cooperation, I think, will stick around, whether or not we have a second wave, and will stick around into the future. And I think we've learned that we get an awful lot more done if we don't panic, as others have said, and try and cooperate, or at least understand the other person's point of view. And that goes both ways. Many boards were able to convince me about why they had their positions. And it was nice to do it in a face-to-face setting. And my third point, and many of you received this message from me, I've always marveled at the job that property managers do. But in this time, during COVID times, man, they are superheroes. And so, finally, the level of cooperation that we've received from managers getting the job done cannot be overstated. And I really want to applaud each and every one of you. Many of you are here on this meeting, but every chance I get, I try and tell you guys, you're doing a superhero's job, and I thank you very much for that as an essential service. So those are my 3 points. Those are my 3 minutes. I'm going to enjoy the next trip around the sun, and hopefully the next time I get to have a beer with all of you.
Thanks, John. All right, so now moving on to Sue from our Toronto chapter and our Master of Communication. Sue, what have you learned in the last 3 months dealing with COVID?
Well, number one, I think the importance of proactive communication has really, been in the spotlight. So many times we, react to certain situations. COVID-19, of course, was one of them. But proactivity really helped a lot. Way back in February, just notices publishing things around your buildings, letting people know, wash your hands, don't touch your face, little simple things like that really went a long way. So proactivity now, obviously if there's another wave, people will start letting people know about those things in advance. That's really great. But one way we can do right now is practice with the AGM. So everybody doing online AGMs, it can be pretty crazy out there. You have, you know, many, many times the number of people on an online AGM meeting than is ideal. So one of the best things that a team can do right now is to get something up in the building. So for example, this screen you're seeing now, this would be a series of notices that you could post around your building. And if you don't have screens, that's fine. There's other ways to get this message out. But it sets the expectation. So for example, you're letting people know way in advance, you know, a week to 2 weeks in advance, letting people know, you know what, you don't have to jump on the AGM and start piling on with questions. Take your time. After every agenda item, something, you know, the floor will be open to ask questions. So just letting people know that in advance. The next slide shows, lets people know what the purpose of the AGM is. So the goal of the board here would be to shorten the AGM, you know, deal with things in advance. So people that want to jump in and go, hey, why isn't my air conditioner working properly, or something like that, or just reminding people that it's about the business affairs of the building, not necessarily your own personal affairs. And that can help to shorten and to lessen the number of questions that occur in an AGM. A third one that you might do is to remind people, you know, it's a new format for everyone. You know, nobody's really used to having 200 people in an AGM online and trying to juggle the questions and the technology. So there's people trying to learn the technology, even though a lot of boards are doing rehearsals, the residents aren't generally part of those rehearsals. So just reminding everyone to take their time and be patient can help be proactive before an AGM occurs. Questions. This is something that's always happened. I know town halls are great for asking Q&As. What happens though is a lot of residents don't bother to think, put the mind input into thinking of questions beforehand. So if your communications person or your team has someone who can just sit there and dream up everything that might be asked during an AGM, and then post these again on your screen or around the building. You know, we put together these slideshows and can give you a clickable link sort of thing. Anything like that helps be proactive and should result in a better, clearer, shorter AGM, or anything for that matter.
Thanks, Sue. And you know, visuals are always so important. You always got some great visuals there to share with us. So thanks. All right, next up, Debbie Dale, our president of CCI Huronia. What have you learned with respect to virtual meetings, Debbie?
Thanks, Sonia. I learned that virtual meetings are actually possible and practical. They're effective and efficient communication tools. Moreover, they reduce the spread of germs and viruses. Who knew? Condo board directors can stay connected and join a virtual meeting from anywhere in the world. Anyone can meet via a virtual meeting platform in less time than it takes to hold a live meeting. Virtual meetings allow for better use of time. Calendarized meetings, I have learned, are absolutely ideal. You can plan the less important things around the time slot virtual meetings. And if you're into time management, wow, I've learned a lot. It's also really easy to adjust to meet the needs of many meeting participants. Visually, you can share the screen to guide understanding. Audibility is really easy to adjust for those that do require hearing supports. A translator or support person can attend a virtual meeting remotely and thereby make the communication process so much easier. And it really gives a more accessible and inclusive environment for everyone involved. You can comfortably keep a virtual meeting within set criteria for behavior or conduct that may be distributed to attendees before the meeting. And I hate to say control the crowd, but if you're in management, you know what I mean by that. And also it's easier for some people to share in a virtual meeting and express their ideas and opinions, whereas in a real live situation, they may not get their voice heard. Virtual meetings can be recorded to provide a communication platform the board can rely on in years as a record. Virtual meeting platforms, many of them are free. Who knew? Free is always ideal in condominiums. Travel time to and from meetings is gone forever in my world, and really What a waste of time. Virtual meetings support remote management of multiple sites in large geographic areas. I'm up in Northern Ontario, so bringing to remote areas more expertise and support than was formerly available has been a big win, not only for myself, but my clients. Everyone in the virtual meeting can stay on track through screen sharing. For example, you can put up one board report at a time and actually keep your entire board focused on that, which is really important. Big hint, some forward-thinking management firms may just start amending their management services agreements to provide for virtual meetings with less increase in contract fees in the future. I'd be watching for that one. Virtual meetings are my big lesson learned to enable condominium managers and those they serve to connect more easily. In summary, we've learned to go virtual. Certainly I have. So apply the lesson, even if a second wave never arrives, and let's keep the virtual energy flowing. Thanks, Sonia.
Thanks, Debbie, and yay to virtual meetings. I love them too. I think they're the way of the future. So moving from the president of CCI Huronia to the president of our Toronto chapter, Tanya, what have you learned in the last couple of months about dealing with COVID and working during this time period?
Well, firstly, I'm going to echo a lot of what Debbie had mentioned too, that working remotely, not a vacation. So despite popular belief that we're just sitting at home having a good time, that is not the case. What it's shown, really, to echo some of the leadership comments that my peers have mentioned, is it really shows the resilience in property management and all the affiliate industries around the condominium corporations, because we had to shift our work-life balance for sure. So where we were in an office with a PC, with an office with a door that we could close, we found ourselves with challenges with kids, other human beings in the house, all vying for bandwidth, attention, homework. Now school's over, so hopefully there'll be some alleviation for that. But it really showed our ability to be nimble and pivot quickly during a pandemic. So from the workload part is really more work for property managers, because not only did we have to deal with a fluid pandemic, excuse the pun, but it was intentional. It's in addition to dealing with the regulations that are ever changing, recommendations, keeping people safe, the staff, our communities, the workers that come in there. In addition to the regular workload, that day-to-day stuff didn't change, but now we've piled on all this extra stuff that we weren't prepared for. With the video chats, that's really added a more of a human touch, I think, and personalized some of what we do, where we would have maybe normally picked up the telephone or sent a quick email. Now we're doing these video chats where at least you can see a face and a reaction and have a little bit more human contact when we're in this age of physical distancing and we can't be proximate to each other. So it's caused us to also work smarter and more efficiently when you're working remotely, because you may have those extra distractions. It gives you some control over the interruptions that you might normally have if you were sitting in a site office or in a back office where you have people just walking up to your desk asking you for things. So you have a little bit more control in that respect. With the virtual meetings, I'm not going to touch on everything that Debbie had mentioned, but more and more with the online meetings, I think it started a nice evolution where we started doing board meetings remotely, got people used to that idea, got a comfort level established, and now moving on to the next step. And Mina had mentioned that too, of getting the AGMs, town hall meetings, getting the rest of the ownership and the communities used to having these online meetings where you could still get the information across, you can still participate, and hopefully this will be the way of the future, that we continue to do this, that when we get back to whatever the new normal is, we're not going to go back to old habits of distributing stacks and stacks of paper that just kill trees and go in the garbage, and we do the document sharing online. And when I think of other people on this panel have mentioned, property management was deemed an essential service. So our service delivery really is essential on how we provide that service to all of the condominium communities that we manage. And as employers, whether it's a company employer or board member, we really have to, it's our responsibility to protect that essential team and make sure they're safe and healthy, and reducing commutes, reducing that stress of going in between meetings, I think will really help. With that. In addition to all the money we've saved on pants, because no one can see us from below the shoulder, so we don't have to worry about dry cleaning and clothing costs. And really, and these
Sonia, I'm gonna have to stop you there.
Oh no!
Long, so can you just finish your comments in the chat box because we've got to move on.
Okay,
so
just
moving
be
on.
Excellent to each other.
Thanks, Tanya. So moving on to one of our CCI Huronia board members, Evan. What have you learned in the last couple months?
So, you know, I've always prided myself in trying to build a flexible work environment for our staff. And what I've learned is I didn't go far enough. We contemplated for a long time having mobile computing, VPN access, cell phone and work phone integration, and trying to be a paperless office. But what we didn't ever anticipate is doing that and having to work from home for a prolonged period of time, having everybody work from home and not having people be able to go in. You know, we used to be able to count on certain staff being able to, you know, they're 9 to 5 or someone's, you know, comes in early. Some people like to work late. But right now, many of my staff are juggling 2 jobs. You know, they're a teacher and they're a daycare and they're not able to work a regular a shift, if you were to say. And so we've had to be a lot more flexible in accommodating that. But that also means if I need to meet with someone, I need to be flexible to be with them sometimes at 10 p.m. And so, you know, working from home or the ability to work from home is different. And I think we're going to get better and put in processes and procedures that not are just paperless, but also account for the fact that we can't physically be in the same room. You know, we onboarded 2 new staff during the COVID time. You know, that's a difficult thing to do and try to get them their IT equipment and the training that they need and you know, all of the staff procedures. And so I think going forward, what we're looking for is not how do we work from home, but and how do we provide a flexible work environment is how do we effectively do that and so people can work efficiently. You know, it's great working from your you know, kitchen room, dining room table or kitchen counter for a couple of hours at the beginning of a day or at the end of a day, but not so much for 3 months straight. And so how do we help our staff get ergonomic desks and chairs and multiple displays so that they could be more efficient and more comfortable while working? And so that's something that I don't have the answers for, but it's something that we're working towards and being more flexible with their staff and the staff situations that they're dealing with.
Thanks, Evan. All right, and moving on to one of our great friends from the Grand River chapter, Pam. What have you learned over the last couple of months, especially as a property manager?
What I took away from all of this and what I learned was the importance of teamwork. And a quote came to mind from Helen Keller, where she says, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And that really showed with what we're all going through right now regarding teamwork, because no one could have prepared for an event like a global pandemic, where we were all put on lockdown. And with it, as well as us as property managers, like despite the uncertainty surrounding COVID-19, life and work did not stop. For managers, the pandemic posed new challenges as our job thrives on the human interaction and connectivity. The only uncertainty surrounding COVID-19 was that there was an immense amount of uncertainty due to the lack of understanding and the understanding of the information. So it required all of us at this time to really lean on each other and learn how we can work together. And we had to work together as a team, because you can have a team, but a team doesn't work unless you have really good teamwork. And it's important for you to succeed and for everyone to have a really long-going rapport and what you really needed. So with teamwork, it brings new ideas, and we needed a lot of new ideas during this time because we had a lot of things we never anticipated and that we had to figure out what we're going to do. It helps with problem solving, because there again, we had a lot of problems we had to solve, and we had a lot of things we had never anticipated. It's supportive. Like teamwork, we really need. It creates a system to ensure that we have the help that we need and that we were there to help each other out as a team. And teamwork builds morale. Like you really feel that your work is valued when you contribute to something and you produce results. Confidence and trust are built within a team. Each team member has something special to offer, and by working together as a team, you feel a strong sense of belonging and a deep commitment to each other, and you have a common goal, and together as a team you work towards that common goal. So what I really thought is important is you need the confidence and the trust that's built under a team. Each team member has something special to offer, and by working together, members of a team feel a strong sense of belonging and deep commitment to each other to reach again that common goal. And our goal is to try to get through this. What I really found is, like, during this global crisis, I truly feel that we learn that we're not in this alone. And like right now, here we all are. We're all here as a member of CCI, and we're all coming from across the nation, and we have come together weekly as a group to really be there to educate and to support each other and really make us feel like, hey, we're not alone. We are all in this together. And myself as a proud member of the CCI team, like, I just want to I'm thanking CCI Huronia for allowing all of our chapters to be together once a week, to lean on each other and to know that we're not in this alone. We're in this together. Thank you, CCI Huronia. That's what I learned.
Thanks, Pam. And you know, you couldn't have said it better. What a great team we have, CCI as a team from coast to coast. All right, moving on to our resident real estate agent, Ashley Lamb. What have you learned in the last couple months dealing with condos and COVID?
Well, I gotta say, Pam, you made me tear up there. Like that was so nice. So honestly, I'm just really impressed with how people have come together, how the communities, the condo communities, and the professionals have come together through this hard time. Property managers responded so quickly to COVID-19 by putting together plans and new policies in place to make their condo communities feel safe, especially at the beginning. And here we were all, this is all new to us, so we're all scrambling, trying to figure out, okay, what do we have to do to lead the pack, right? And for instance, just the social distancing tape in elevators and lobbies, and hand sanitizer when you first walk into the buildings, managing who's on site all the time, and addressing residents' ongoing concerns. Well, those few things sound really easy now that we're used to it, but were a real big deal at the beginning, and we were all panicking, didn't know what to do. Residents truly came together. Many complexes put together buddy system for groceries, and offered to take other neighbors' garbage out. Communities sang from balconies and happy hours from a distance. People had to adapt and were forced to change their ways in a very short period of time. Many stayed connected through teleconference for board members, Zoom meetings as we're doing, community newsletters and letters on lobby elevator screens, and of course, you know, through our weekly webinars. You know what? Although we have all been physically apart, I honestly feel that many communities have become stronger through this. That's it.
Thanks, Ashley. All right, moving on to Patricia. I'm sure there's lots you've learned in the last dealing with crisis, but what's the main thing you've learned in the last couple months?
Well, I've learned that my hair grows faster than Murray's and Justin's. I've never realized how many touch points there are in a condominium and how many people visit condominiums, from grandchildren to contractors. So to avoid the anxiety, a critical thinking process for boards is very valuable in managing guests. The way I look at it, the virus is alive and well, so the key objective still remains to avoid or eliminate transmission. Understanding the risk factors of the community makes it personal to the community. Do you have members in your community that are vulnerable? Do you have a lot of work going on this summer? Think about how to minimize or eliminate the risk. Discourage guests, limit guests. Ask people to wear masks on the common elements. Remind folks not to touch surfaces directly. Use your elbows. I've never used my elbows in these ways. And maintain physical distancing. Think about specific spaces in the condominium. Will guests be allowed on the common element amenities? All things to think about. Are guests going to have to sign in and answer a set of questions? And who's going to keep that data? Will contact tracing be provided to anyone other than a unit owner or a resident? Boards need to think about this. And one of the things that I think is so important and valuable in these times is communicate, communicate, communicate. I think most of us here have said it is a core value for all of us, is communicating with everybody to set expectations, know where we're going, over communicate so people know they're not alone. And, you know, I reiterate what Pam said. Well said, Pam.
Thanks, Patricia.
That was under time, Sonia.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed. You didn't get the gong tonight. You've learned how to keep it in the time period.
There you are.
All right. Moving on to Sally, who's another great friend of CCI from CCI Toronto. What have you learned, Sally, in the last couple of months?
Thanks, Sonia. The most important thing I learned is the value of a very comfortable office chair, because that's the first thing I started to miss. But when Sonia emailed out asking for people to participate tonight, I happened to be watching some news, and it was showing pictures of, large groups of people out without face covering, and particularly in the States, but also here in Canada. And I've been out to a few site meetings too, where people who are with me are reluctant to wear face covering. They feel embarrassed, and I think in the States, we're seeing this kind of concept where, I'm too tough to wear a face covering. I'm macho, I'm strong. I don't need a face covering. And I think it's really sad because it's just evidence of really poor communication. Like, we've all seen it. You don't need masks. You do need masks. You should wear masks. If you're a Republican, you don't need a mask. If you're a Democrat, you do. And I think that's a really bad example it's a really good example of bad communication and not leading by example. It's very easy to be an unnamed politician who is surrounded by people who are tested all the time and who's tested all the time, and to stand up and say you don't need a mask. But when your followers are not surrounded by those same protections, I think you're really putting people at risk. And so then we look to other countries and say, okay, what lessons can we learn from them? And they get it there that you don't wear a face covering to protect yourself, unless you happen to be a doctor or a nurse and you're wearing an N95 and goggles. You're actually wearing that face covering because you yourself might be sick. And when you're out in public, you might be coughing or you might be speaking, and your droplets that might be contaminated might be getting on to somebody else. And so when someone chooses not to wear a face covering, then obviously they're not being brave, they're not being strong, they're being completely and thoroughly disrespectful to the people that are around them. And so what does that mean to condos? And so I thought tonight, okay, well, I'm coming to talk to this group, and this group is managers, and this group is, leaders of significant management firms and of condos and condo directors. And I thought, you know what, when a group like this gets together and says, you know what, let's make a difference on this, let's use the tools that we have to communicate to the people who we influence. And so that's us to everybody who's attending tonight. And it's all of you to the people who you influence. If we can all make a positive difference to getting people to get on board with face coverings when they're out, whether people are out in the common areas of their condos or whether they're out in the world as a whole, then I think that a group like this, in Ontario, there's like 11,000 condos, right? I'm fairly sure most of them are here tonight. So I think we can influence a significant part of the population. But anyways, if everybody here who's present today makes a concerted effort through their communication channels to encourage face coverings when people are out in public, then I think that a group like this can have an impact on whether or not we face a second wave. And the more people who do that, the higher probability that we get out of this nonsense sooner. So that's my big lesson is, first, it's kind of two things. One, wear your face covering, darn it all. And second, communicate clearly so people understand why they're doing something, and don't put any baloney in the message. Just be clear.
Thanks, Sally. And you're always to the point. Wear a mask out of respect.
Exactly.
All right. And another friend from our CCI Toronto chapter, Murray Johnson. Words of wisdom from your lessons for the last couple of months.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I want to start off by saying I've learned I have a higher tolerance for alcohol than I thought I had. Setting that aside, though, I've listened to everybody's lessons learned, and there's one common thread that everybody has. And to highlight that, I'm going to tell you a short story, and I'm going to go rather quickly. I promise, Sonia. In 1998, I was managing a condominium of 177 townhouses. And I had 177 terrible cases of ice damming. These townhouses had 8 or 9 steps leading up to the front door, and 8 to 12 inches of ice on those steps was not uncommon. The board directed me to go and find some solutions, obviously, and I did find a company, and they provided me some specs and a quote for just over $250,000. I presented that at a board meeting, and the board said, Murray, if you tell us to spend the money, we'll do it. And that's when it hit me. I didn't have enough information to feel confident in telling them to spend $250,000. So I went on a journey. I went on a 3-winter journey, looking at ice damming, the causes of ice damming, applying some of those specs that were sent to us. And we did pictures and weather logs. We compared test groups against untreated units. I became an expert on ice damming, its causes and its solutions. I went to the board with that overdue recommendation, and I said, do it, and do it now. Do it before the next winter comes. And they did. And we got a 98.5% reduction on heat loss through the roof. That was a 99% reduction of ice damming, and that was a 100% reduction of danger on the stairs. It was dramatic and it was obvious. The company used my analysis to apply for a grant from CMHC and received $1 million to continue their research. Now, what does all this have to do with the pandemic? Managers, directors, lawyers, engineers, everybody's had to learn relatively quickly on how to become an expert at maneuvering through all of the changes and the turmoil of a pandemic. It took me 20 years to get to that townhouse and those ice damming problems. And at that time, when the project was over, I vowed to become an expert on every major issue that crossed my desk. I naively thought by the end of my career, I might be 50-50, an expert on half and not know that much about the other half. You have all had to learn to do the same thing, and you've had less than 20 weeks to do that. You've really learned a tremendous lesson here. So I'd like to see you continue to do that beyond the end of this pandemic. Do what I'm doing. Become an expert on all those issues that cross your desk. It's this that makes you a teacher, a good mentor, and a better leader. You're recognized for what you know, but more importantly, for what you share. Sonia?
Thanks, Murray. And Murray, we had a bit of trouble hearing you, so we had some requests in the chat box if maybe you could provide that your story to us in writing so that we can share it with everybody on the webinar tonight. So just to round out our lessons learned in preparing for the second wave, there's 2 lessons I learned through these last couple months. One is act on knowledge, not fear. And second is adapt. Challenges always create new opportunities and a chance to improve the way we used to do things, to make us better. Virtual meetings is a perfect example of that. So those are the 2 lessons I've learned over the last couple of weeks. We're past 8 o'clock. We do have one question that came in advance of tonight's webinar, and I'm going to put that out there, and any of our speakers, if you want to jump in to answer, feel free to do so. If you do have a question and you want to ask your question live, don't forget, you can just raise your hand, and if I see your hand raised, I will unmute you, and then you can ask your question. So this is the question that came in. If you live in a condo with no concierge, on-site property management, or live-in superintendent, is the board expected to carry out the supervision of the amenities, monitor trades and guests, carry out the extra cleaning? And then the second part to this question is, how do you handle owners or residents who think this is all overkill with the restrictions? So maybe the first part of the question, Patricia, maybe I'll shoot it to you first. Does the board have to carry out all these duties?
Oh, yes. You still have the obligation to manage the assets, and you still have to make sure things are done to the right standard. So the board, really has to think about what do they want to take on and what do they want to take responsibility for. if they're going to core it down and if they're going to undertake it themselves. But yes, still had occupier liability still there. Life goes on in this new normal, but it's still the same standard.
All right. In the second part of the question, maybe we'll push that over to Casey, because you talked about managing expectations. How do you handle owners and residents who think this is all overkill?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's difficult, right? Because as managers, we typically deal with having to work with that middle group, right? We always have people on one side who are fans no matter what we do, and we have people on the other side who it doesn't matter what we do, and we need to hit that 10% who we have the ability to try to move to the side of what we want. So I think what's best is that you focus on the ones you can move, and hopefully they will assist in helping the people who think it's overkill and not worth any of their time or effort.
Tanya, Murray, and Debbie, or other property managers, any insights that you want to add to that answer?
Sure. All you got to do is look at the news. A couple of times I've had directors come up to me and say, it's too much, we're not going to do it. And then I just remind them of the numbers that are reported every day in the news. This stuff is deadly.
Tanya, Debbie?
Yeah, to Sally's point too, is changing the conversation of, it's not, we're not asking you to do this, we're asking you to help your fellow neighbor and show that respect of, you may have a different perspective, but you need to also have respect for other people's plights that may have some some resistance or some immune compromise situation that you don't know about. And it's all of our responsibility as human beings to protect each other.
Thanks,
Can
Debbie.
I jump in too, Sonia, for a second?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
You know what, at the very beginning of this thing, there was a lot of resistance. You know, I'm in a very male-dominated business as an engineer, and I think particularly men were prone at the beginning to sort of, you know, pshaw, this is nothing. And I sort of remember two quotes from the beginning from the World Health Organization. One was, any preparation you make at the beginning of an event like this will seem like overkill before it started, but will seem woefully inadequate by the time it's over. And so that's a kind of strong message to give people. And then the other one is, you know what, let's all hope for the best, but let's plan for the worst. And so sometimes I find with those people who are not interested in moving, if you give them those two messages, they kind of see, yeah, you know what, it is dumb to plan for the best. Let's plan for the worst just to be safe. And I find that tends to move those personalities a little bit if they'll have the dialogue with you.
Debbie, anything else you want to add?
Well, I think going back to what Sue spoke to this evening, it's all about communication, and often the people that just don't really want to believe this is all happening, some private communication can be really helpful to kind of get them with the program that most of the world is now in.
Thanks. Anyone else from our speakers tonight want to add any comments to that question? No? All right. Well, I don't see any hands raised. I guess we answered everybody's questions for a change. I think we're going to skip the live question and answer period and move on and wrap up this our last webinar on COVID-19. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time out, not only once, but twice, and coming back to help us out again. This has been an interesting ride for all of us the last few months, and we thank all of you for joining CCI as we try to bring you relevant and practical information to help guide you through these difficult times. If you found these webinars informative and helpful, please join us in the fall as CCI Huronia will be launching our fall series of Lunch and Learn webinars. Don't forget to check out our website, ccihuronia.com, during the summer to find out more about these upcoming webinars and how to register. But for now, you can mark your calendars on the following dates: September 18th, October 16th, November 20th, and December 11th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. We will be having monthly Lunch and Learn webinars. As always, a recording of today's webinar will be posted on the CCI Huronia website. If you haven't joined us or liked us on Facebook, please do so. If you're not part of our email list and you want to be, to get all of the latest information of all the great things that we're doing, send an email to admin@ccihuronia.com, ask to be added to our email list. If you're not a member of CCI, consider joining one of your local chapters. You can go to the national website to find out a chapter near you. Our new membership year starts July 1st, so this is the perfect time to either renew your membership or join us today as a new member. Other chapters have some upcoming events in July. CCI Grand River has their Leaders Circle on July 7th. You can register on their website, cci-grc.ca. CCI Toronto has a webinar on July 16th called Climate Change in Condos. You can register on their website, ccitoronto.org. And CCI Golden Horseshoe has a webinar on July 16th on how to host a virtual AGM. You can register on their website, cci-ghc.ca. Until next time, I'm Sonia Hodis. I ask you, please be safe, be patient, be kind, wear a mask, have a great summer, wash your hands, maintain physical distancing. And if we all continue this teamwork that we've started over the last couple of months, we can crush COVID. From the entire CCI family to your family, wishing you a great week, a great summer. And until we see you again, don't forget that CCI is your condo connection. Good night, everyone.